Hi, and welcome to Create and Accelerate. I am your host, Alex, and this is your space for practical tools, design tips, and career growth secrets. Whether you are building your own freelance business or sharpening your skills as a creative, I'm here to help you grow, succeed, and accelerate towards your dream. Today, we are tackling something that is on every freelancer's mind, and that is how to determine your rates. This is something that I, for certain, and I'm sure you will too, come back to and think about throughout your career, because as you grow and as you level up, you are going to face changing your rates. And I want to start with saying that your worth is dependent on how you value yourself. And you can look at this as, this is how much I value myself and this is how much I'm worth like right now. But you can also look at it like I have these dreams and goals and visions for myself, and I believe that I am worthy of reaching those goals. And because I believe that I'm worthy, I am ready to invest my time and my energy into honing my skills, to educate myself so that I can get there. And so in that way, how you actually perceive your own worth and your own value is probably going to change. And there's so many different strategies and ways to think about this, so let's break it down. All right, so we're going to cover 6 things today. 1, determine your skill level, because this obviously impacts your rate. 2, we're going to talk about the influence of the client, geography, and the client's budget. 3, moving beyond the hourly. We're going to talk about value-based pricing, project pricing, and what that means. 4, we are going to talk about negotiation, baby, because you're never going to get to those numbers that you dream of if you're not mastering the art of negotiation to some level. 5, we're going to talk about the power of long-term clients and long-term contracts and retainer contracts. 6, we're going to talk about how to maintain high client retention through communication and professionalism. So let's dive in. 1, know your skill level. So first you have to assess where you're at, okay? Because this is obviously one of the major factors in terms of what value you're going to bring to your client. So I'm going to, just for simplicity's sake, break it down to junior designer, mid-level designer, senior designer, and creative director. So let's break these down so that we have clarity on that. I think where it gets muddy is maybe when you're transitioning between 2 of them. So let's just try to be clear on that. Junior designer, really fresh out of school or freshly out of I'm self-taught. Don't have a ton of technical tools, but master obviously the basics within design and creativity. Highly in need of mentorship and guidance from a more experienced designer. Then we have the next level, which is mid-level designers. So this is obviously someone who has started to get a little bit warmed up in the industry. They start to understand a little bit more about the processes, communicate this a little bit clearer to their mentors or their managers. Then we get to senior designers, and senior designers, I would say, is when you're starting to get into a little bit more of a leadership role as a designer or guide other designers on your team. You're probably getting a little bit more responsibility from your creative director or your manager. And then we get to the creative director, who is someone who can really confidently talk about different aesthetics, different styles, put together very consistent directions, has a really clear view of the creative process, how to bring the client through this process, how to bring and align their team in this process, able to negotiate deadlines, take those tougher conversations, whether it's with the client or with the team, motivate a team, understanding how to give direction clearly to a team so that a team can really work together. And so you want to look at these 4 different roles, obviously within the country that you're in. But I would say, just as an example, and I think it helps to think about this as in ranges. If you look at the US, a junior designer, somewhere around $20 to $50 an hour. Mid-level designer, $50 and $100 per hour. Senior designer, $80 to $150 per hour. And then you have a creative director who would charge usually around $150 per hour and up. These are really ranges, and it is going to depend on a lot of different factors, which we are going to cover. But for instance, who your client is, what their budget is, where you are in the country. Are you in a very metropolitan area where the prices are higher and your clients are used to higher prices? It can also depend on whether you are working on a very short project or if you're working on a very long-term project. So there's a lot of factors that goes into it. So it's important to know or understand a little bit your range, and then kind of navigate within that range depending on the factors that apply specifically to you in your case and your client. 2, if we're going to talk about the influence of your client's location and their budget, this is obviously going to have a major impact in how you can set your rates. There's going to be a big difference if your client is in a metropolitan area or not, for instance. There's going to be a difference in terms of the size of your client, or at least, their profits, basically, what type of client it is. You're going to always have to take this into account when you are negotiating. So if you're working with a small family-owned business or a cafe up the street from your place, you're most likely not going to be able to charge very high. But if you are working with a top-tier agency or a large corporate, you should aim for the higher end of your range. And this is also where we get into you determining your own value and maybe a little bit about your own beliefs and what type of clients that you can attract. And if you keep hitting a roof with smaller type of clients, try to think outside of the box. Like, what are other clients that you would dream to work with that would maybe have bigger budgets? How can you start working with them? Research them, see how you can reach out to them, see if you can maybe even make some projects for free for them or some advice just to start the conversation with them and get in that way. 3, we're going to talk about going beyond the hourly and value-based pricing. And I think this is a very, very interesting topic. I'm a huge fan of Chris Voss that we're going to get into and talk more about later because he is one of the world's top negotiators. And he says, control the conversation by controlling your process. And in this case, I think you could say that you are controlling your rate by controlling you having a really solid process. Value-based pricing means that you are setting your rate based off of the value that you are providing your clients. And for some people, they feel really uncomfortable with this because they think I'm paying for the hours that someone is spending. I would say that that might not always for a client be the best way to think about it because value can come in so many different ways, shapes, and forms than how many hours that you clocked your designer working on something. I'm sure you heard the story of Picasso sitting down in a cafe, scribbling something on a napkin, and then he just tosses it away, and someone in the cafe goes up and says, "Oh, can I please have your sketch from your napkin?" And he says, "Sure, you can have it for $1 million," or whatever he said. And the person in the cafe is really upset. $1 million? Like, it took you like 2 seconds to make that drawing. To which Picasso says, "It took me a lifetime to draw this drawing." So I would say that value-based pricing is really it can be the natural skills that you have for the profession that you're in. It can be the amount of hours that you have spent in invested in yourself and stayed up late and learned specific skills and become a really versatile designer. So the higher skilled you are, the more skills you have, and the quicker you can get it right, the more value you are going to provide to your clients. So if we're just taking as an example here, I listen a lot to Chris Do, who is the CEO and founder of Future. I definitely recommend his series, but he talks about that really the value is in the results, not the hours that you have spent on something. So just to give you an example, if you have, let's say that you are the client and you have 2 different designers or creatives that you can work with. One of them is $5,000, the other one is $10,000 for the same type of work. However, the one for $5,000 is getting it wrong, maybe not as communicated. You have to go through maybe 10 revisions with the designer. They're not quite like getting what you're looking for. They're not quite getting it right. And then you have the other designer who charges $10,000. It goes faster. You only have maybe 2 or 3 revisions. You feel like they really get what you're looking for, and the end result might even bring your business more business or generate more income for you because the product was so good. So $5,000, $10,000, even if the other designer did it faster, are you really going to pay more for the person who it took longer to make something for you than for someone who is super professional, getting it right straight away, saves you time, aka saves you money? That is one way to break down what value-based pricing really is about. So in order to actually land a deal like this, you are going to need to master a certain level of negotiation skills, which we are going to get into in a second. First, I just wanted to say a word of caution, and that is when it comes to value-based pricing or project-based pricing, you also need to really have your own process down right, and you need to have a certain level of being able to communicate in a really smooth way with your clients, because otherwise you might risk having the project just taking way longer than you had estimated in the first place. And then when you kind of count the hourly price for yourself, you end up with a way lower rate than you had intended to. It's really, really important that when you do these types of contracts, I mean, it's always important, but that you have a very, very clear outline of work contract in like what are the deliverables, what are the expectations, make sure that you're aligned with the client, and also make really sure that you are aligned and that the client understands what the expectations are on them in meeting their deadlines in terms of returning with feedback. Because if they're not coming back to you with feedback in time and they're not honoring the deadlines that you have agreed upon, then you're going to fall behind. You might have other client commitments. So you need to also communicate very clearly upfront, even before you start the project, to your clients that what happens in case you're unable to meet the feedback deadlines. For instance, you can say you have to be okay with that we need to move the project or put the project completely on pause and move the project to a later time and move the deadline to a later time so that we can still honor our commitments to our other clients and other project deadlines. So pro tip here is you should clearly communicate the scope of the project, the deliverables, the project timeline, the plan, and the expectations in terms of feedback from the client and what happens when these expectations are not met. That's a really important one. Or what do we do if something doesn't go according to the plan? Because that's why you want to have a contract when things are not going as you had intended to, because everyone always wants it to go well, right? The contract is there so that you know what to do when it doesn't go according to the plan. All right, 4. We are going to talk about negotiation, and this is honestly a topic that I think is so exciting. And one of the masters on this topic is Chris Voss, who was one of FBI's top negotiators over like 40 years. And I devoured his book, Never Split the Difference. I learned so much from it. I would honestly say that it was life changing for me because it just changed completely how I approached negotiations. It changed how I went into negotiations. It changed my whole perception of what negotiation is. I think you're never completely comfortable with negotiations, but it made me more confident in it. And it made me confident in going into negotiations with knowing that there will be a great outcome coming out of it. Because the truth is also, you are never going to get to the race that you dream of if you don't master negotiations to a certain extent or force yourself to become comfortable and going into a negotiation confidently. One of the most important things to just understand about negotiation is that it's not an argument. You can have nerves going into negotiation, but you shouldn't be scared of it because the whole point of a negotiation is to have two parties talk about their different needs and then come to an aligned decision in how to move forward. That is really what it is. It's about expressing your needs. It's really like a relationship, you know? You gotta express your needs so that you can move forward and grow together. That's really what you do with your client. It's a relationship, okay? And relationships are hard. You have to work on them. Okay, let's move on. And something that Chris Voss also says is negotiation is not something that is reserved for like diplomats and billionaires. Like negotiations happen in everyone's everyday life. And it's a skill that really can be mastered. You can train it, you can learn about it, you can learn tactics for it, and you can get better at it. And I personally learned a lot about it when I was offered a job at Meta a couple of years ago. I actually hired a company to help negotiate for me. This company, I can really recommend them. They have not told me to make this video or anything. This happened years ago, but they are called levels.fyi. And I hired a negotiator there for $800. And I can tell you they were able to negotiate up my salary from what I first initially was offered like thousands of dollars. So it was the best $800 that I have invested in anything. And what was really interesting there was just to see, I could really see her tactics and how she was negotiating because we had a really clear process of, Facebook would call me, now it's Meta, but they would call me, make me the offer. And my negotiator had told me that never to accept an offer on the phone, always get back to them through an email. And so we did this dance like back and forth for a while, and it was freaking nerve-wracking because I was at the same time like when I really thought I had like pushed to like the edge, and I was like, I can't do it. I can't wait for another email. I can't wait for another call. My negotiating coach was really like pushing me to like stay in it, and we were able to get to a number I would never have thought I would get to at that point in my career. So it was a really great learning experience for me. But back to talking about how to determine your freelance rate. So I would say, first of all, you want to do your homework. You want to understand who your client is, the things that we just talked about, like how big are they? What are their potential budget? Where are they located? What other freelancers are they working with? Do you know what they are charging? You can use Glassdoor, for instance. You can actually get a pretty good sense of how much they might be willing to pay for a freelancer. If you're a senior designer and you look at how much they generally pay for their full-time senior designer employees, bump up that value with 40-50%, and that can give you a pretty informed direction. Also want to make sure that you have done your homework in terms of how you're presenting yourself, how you're pitching yourself. What is the value that you're going to bring to the client? Think about what projects you have worked on in the past that actually would be interesting to this particular client to see. Don't show any project. Like, be prepared. If you are gonna do branding for a beauty brand, you want to show something that has something to do with beauty. Don't show a project that was for, I don't know, a soccer brand or something. If you have a beauty brand in your portfolio, make sure that you have prepared properly. Your client's time is valuable and you want to really respect that. It's also great to, if you can, include tangible proof of the value that you have brought your clients, whether that is numbers and saying that, look, I helped this client with their email templates and we were able to increase the opening rate for their emails with 50% or something like that, that you can actually articulate and show. That shows a little bit more that you are actually focus as a designer to bring value to your clients. 2, you want to set your threshold. So you want to be really clear for yourself what your bottom line is and be prepared to walk away. If you want to present the range to your client, you might want to present them with different tiers. So basically a basic package, premium package, deluxe, something like that, so that you have different levels of providing value, but also different price points. But it still gives and opens up the communication with the client. Because in the end, if you just present a number and the client is like, no, then you don't have more communication and more negotiation to go through. You want to always present everything so that it opens up the conversation. Give them a this or that, so you can continue the conversation instead of just presenting one option. Something else that Chris was also talking about is to use silence as well and not be scared of silence in your negotiations. Silence is your friend. Because if you are filling up the space with talking all the time, then you're not going to be able to get any information out of the client. And you need client to give you information because information is power. The more information you have, the more power you have. You are aware. You're aware about your client, their needs, where their pinpoints is. So you want to also make sure that you have practice and rehearse when you are giving your offer. Give the offer and then shut your pretty little mouth. Just be quiet. Be comfortable in the silence. I know 1, 2, 3, 4 seconds can feel like a long time, but it's going to feel way longer for you than it does for the client. I 100% assure you of this. And it is necessary for the client to take in the offer, make up their mind, and then say something back to you. And this is so important. So learn how to get comfortable with silence. You also want to make sure that you are listening actively. So really listen to what your client needs and what they say between the lines, and ask them if you feel any type of hesitation. Ask them really open-ended questions like, what range of budget do you have for this project? Range. Don't say what's your budget. Range. Nobody wants to feel like they're backed into a corner. If you're talking about ranges, you feel like you don't have to say anything definitive. You can continue the conversation. So that is the goal. You can also ask something like, what is the most important thing for you in this partnership? What is the most important outcome for you in this partnership? Who knows? Maybe they're saying that, we don't have a lot of knowledge about social media. And then, you can maybe even offer them something else than you had thought of originally. Additional information is power. Maybe they're saying the most important thing is that we can land this within a certain time frame. Great. If you know that they are really time constrained, then you can push for that and say, look, I have worked on a lot of projects where it's been really tight turnarounds. I'm really confident that we can help you with a minimum number of revisions. And you can really push for how you can provide that value to your client, that you can provide the value of meeting deadlines, being completely transparent in your communication, and making everything run smoothly. This might be the piece of information and reassurance that you need to give your clients in order to land the deal. And then at last, when you both parties have come to an agreement, the client is ready to move forward, you want to seal the deal and do this in a very, very particular manner where you get everything in writing and it's clearly stated what the project entails, what the deliverables entails, the project timeline, everything. And you want to get that in writing, and then you can pop the bottle. And remember also that if you would get a no from a client, or if you cannot agree on the pricing today, remember that a no today can be a yes tomorrow. You never know. The client might come back at a later time when they're in a different place with their business and their finances, and you can work together then. So always treat all your clients and all your professional relationships in a really professional and respectful way. Follow up, thank them for their time so that they know that you are someone who is trustworthy, loyal, easy to communicate with for when they are ready to work with you in the future. Number 5, I want to talk a little bit about the power of long-term contracts and retainers, because that is a little bit of a different animal. If you have a long-term contract with someone, you should probably prepare to lower your rates a little bit compared to a client that you would maybe just work with for a couple of weeks or a couple of months. So that is something that you need to take into consideration. Also, it's almost like a value-based pricing model where you have agreed on a specific amount because of the value that you bring them on a monthly basis. And they're not going to count your hours. It's going to be completely based off of the value that you both have agreed on that you're going to bring them. And for long-term projects, there are different ways to set that up as well. There are people that do hourly. I feel more comfortable with doing half days or full days, or doing like a monthly retainer and just have a monthly pay. And then of course having a clause for if there are specific requests for weekend work or something like that, you might charge extra for the overtime. And how much would you lower your rate as if you have a long-term project? Again, I'm really sorry to say that there's no like cookie cutter clean way to do this, but I would say If I have a contract that's like a year with a client, maybe I could be okay with going down 10 to 20% of my rates. I think one way to look at it could be that you look at how much they would pay a full-time employee, and then you look at how much you need to pay in order to cover your expenses as a freelancer or to run your own business, and then you look at what that would land on and sort of balance the numbers that way. Number 6, how to maintain high client retention through professional communication. So it's really great to master negotiation tactics and land a high paying client. But one of the most successful things that you can achieve as a freelancing designer is to have clients that are coming back to you. You are saving so much money and time is money, on having clients that are coming back to you instead of having to chase down new clients all the time. So keep this in mind and try to always create communication and a relationship with your clients that feels effortless, that feels transparent, where they never have to question anything, and you will see that they will be really loyal to you and come back for you to help them with more work in the future. So, how do you do this? I mean, obviously, you're going to provide them with really great creative work. Okay, this is obvious. But on top of that, you want the entire experience of them working with you to be an experience that they would want to have again, right? Some of the things you can do is, first of all, to actually really have clear contracts, clear communication, expectations set before you start the project can be one of the most important things in terms of making sure that the project is going to go smooth. And all clients want to have smooth processes. All clients want to feel like they are in the know of what's going on, where you're at in the process, if you are keeping up with the trajectory of your plan, if you are going to meet the deadlines. Like, clients always want to know. So always lean on the side of over communicating, being over communicative with your clients. Like, tell them things that they haven't even asked to know. And I would like to say that this goes for whether it's a client or if you're a freelancer and you're working with an agency and you're working with directly with a creative director, treat them the exact same way. Over communicate to the creative director what you're working on, if you need help with anything, if there are any roadblocks, if you really don't think that you can solve it yourself. Some of your clients are going to be more or less familiar with the creative process. Some clients are not going to have any understanding of it at all, and you're going to have to walk them through what is an exploration process, what does that entail, how long does it take, what is the design process, what happens in those different stages, how long is it, does it take a couple of days, does it take a couple of weeks, do you have a post-production process, do you have any type of launch processes as well? Like, you're going to have to walk your client through this because it might be really apparent to you because you're doing this all the time, but your client is not. That's the whole reason why they have hired you, because they need your expertise. So sit down with them in the beginning, if you haven't already, maybe before you have signed the contracts, walk them through the entire process, how you're going to work with them, because I think that also is a really good way to explain and ensure the client of the value that you're bringing. Because if they see that you have a really solid process and you really know what you're talking about, you really know all the phases that you're going to go through and how you're going to do it, that might be really comforting for a client and be the reason why they signed with you. I think it's really good to schedule frequent check-ins with a client, even if there's not something major that you're presenting, but just to be able to touch base, that creates stability and security for your client as well. I always found it really helpful to create a visual timeline of the entire project and show week by week what you're going to be working on, what phase it is. And then as you kind of go through the project, we start the meeting with looking at this timeline. So we can see that now we are on like phase 3 of the project, and I fill that out with a certain color, and you see that this other part that we still have ahead of us is another color. And then at the beginning of the meeting, we can talk about, this is what we have done so far. This is where we're at. This is what we have ahead. This is what is expected from you for next time. This is what we're going to go through today. And the main objective of today is blah, blah, blah. And what we're going to look from you based off of what we're presenting today is blah, blah, blah. Just really talk about where you're at in the process, what just happened, and what is going to happen. Because many times when you're talking to your client, your project is not the only thing on their mind. Like, they have a lot of other things that are going on. And for you, it might be really apparent where you are in the process and what you did last week because you were maybe working on it and looking at it this morning, but your client probably haven't. So you want to take that opportunity to bring the client in and ground them in where you're at in the project, because this is going to make such a difference from what you're going to get out of the meetings with them as well. Something else I think is really, really great to do with the clients to make sure that that things are running smoothly is that you always follow up afterwards with an email that's stating and summarizing what you talked about in the meeting, what insights you had together, what the next steps are, and just to make sure that you have understood everything correctly. And then that is also a great opportunity that if there was anything that was misinterpreted during the call, you'll be able to resolve it really quickly instead of realizing it maybe next week that you have your next meeting, because then that you have lost all that valuable time. Pay really close attention to your client's feedback and what their concerns are, and make sure that you're addressing it, and address it in a way that is a clear statement that they can respond to. Like, oh, okay, I understand. Are you looking for something that is a little bit more modern, or are you looking for something that is more tailored to a younger demographic? So that you can have that conversation and figure that out with the client. And sometimes you are going to have to handhold the client a little bit, especially in the beginning of the process. There are different levels in terms of how much each client has thought about the brief that they're giving you, their target group, and what they actually want and what they actually need. So that is also part of your job as a creative, to help them through that process of figuring that out. When you're done with the project, you have delivered everything, you've gotten paid, everything is done. It's sayonara, thank you so much for working together, this has been great. Still, you can reach out to the client a couple of weeks or a couple of months later to check in and see if they're still really happy with the result. And this is really great for several reasons. A, you're showing the client that you really care. You care about your work, you care about the value that you have provided them with. And then B, this is an excellent opportunity for you to reach out and just remind them that you're there. If they need help with anything else, they can come to you. So just to close this out, I want to say that transparency is not just about being honest. Transparency is to really walk the client through, hold their hand through the entire process. It's a strategic tool to avoid misunderstandings. It is a proactive way to make sure that everyone is aligned throughout the project as it progresses. And by making the client feel like they are in control and they are an understanding of what is going on, they're also way more likely to both work with you again and to recommend you to others. So remember, your work is valuable and your rates should reflect that. The key is to continuously improve yourself, keep learning, keep investing in yourself, learning skills that are also outside of the typical design skill, and you'll be able to create more value for your clients. And when you create more value, you can also negotiate and present that value to your clients so that you can confidently also raise your rates. If you're still watching this video has probably provided you with some level of value, so don't forget to hit the subscribe button, get notified when I upload new videos and tips and tricks to navigate the creative industry. So keep refining your approach, and remember, dreams don't work unless you do. Keep learning, keep creating, and keep accelerating towards your dreams. The best is still ahead.